As always, Dieter Staudinger holding down the chief technical officer's role.
There you go.
Eric Larson, my alternate ego captain, keeping me from lying or helping me swear to them when it's appropriate. Diane is Jeff wants to times the meeting tonight, and Diane Hansen, our resident flight attendant, and Elaine Nedelin, our resident. See, we said you are the resident flight engineer in capacity. There.
AV geek and nerd, and proud of it.
I was trying to use a word other than nerd, though. But anyway,
I think nerd.
No, nerd is good.
Nerd
is a good thing.
Well, this is where you go and where you tell all your peeps to go if they're either afraid to fly or or know somebody who's afraid to fly, and if you just like to know what's happening in the airline industry and some technical things about airplanes, this is also a great place for people to come. So welcome, and we're glad you're here. First thing we want to mention our Birds of a Feather Facebook group, which has been growing by leaps and bounds. And Elaine, tell them about the little surprise we have for the appropriate or the lucky winner when we have one.
When we hit 700 members, the 700th member will receive their choice of either the Fearless Flight Kit or a free 60-minute coaching session with Captain Ron. We're closing in on that lucky 700 number. So please tell your friends about the group. If you have any friends that are fearless flyers or just curious about aviation, have them join the group. They could just request it on Facebook at Fearless Flight, Birds of a Feather. And then either Captain Ron or myself will go in and approve the membership. So spread the word. Spread the word at your workplace, among your friends, wherever. But we're getting awfully close to that lucky 700 winner. So any day now, once we hit 700, we'll announce the winner. Good luck.
Or if you need a sandwich board and stand on the corner of your favorite downtown area, we can do that too. So we're not proud. We'll do anything like that. Okay. Okay, just a little footnote. We have tonight's show, we have a special guest, and I just heard from our special guest, Dieter. If you want to try to send her a message, she's having trouble joining.
Okay.
That was on my message in Mac. So I sent an email.
Okay.
So maybe you can do the
let me find the email, and then you just keep going here with the show.
I just resent it, so it should be right at the top there. So okay, so we have a special guest coming up. We promise you, she just showed up, and right now we'll just move on past down the road. We'll go into our review here. We've been reviewing our How to Overcome Fear Flying book for the past 7 weeks, because we skipped a week. And tonight we're doing chapter 7, which talks about the
why is it so safe to fly? Technology, air traffic control, and human factors.
And so
that's
if
perfect topic for Elaine and Eric and Diane, because these are the things that you guys are really passionate about, all of you.
Yeah. So if you want to flip over there to slide 11, Dieter, that's a quote right out of the book. And remember, this isn't to read you the book necessarily. It's to highlight it so that you can go over and get a copy of your own. It's simple, easy to read, 13 chapters. You can pick it up and read any one, anytime, depending on your interest. Or wherever you want to start, and it gives you a great place to springboard from into finding other questions, because most of the people really, it's not what they don't know, it's what they don't know that they don't know that keeps them stumped on and keeps their anxiety running high. So this quote here says, "Your flight may be the safest part of your day. Most likely, your flight is the safest part of your day, and your trip to the airport is the riskiest one." If you use your chances of dying as a reason for not flying, you can't justify it. Your odds of dying in a tier 1 airplane, airliner is 1 in 33.2 million. And in order to do that, you'd have to fly once a day, every day for 91,000 years to do that. And on the other end of that spectrum is in a car. It used to be 200 times more likely to die in the car. Now I think it's up to like 400 because the fact that aviation has continued to grow safer over the last 20 years. We don't like to think about that because we think we're in greater control when it comes to being in our cars, but that just isn't true. There's 3 reasons for the primarily for the aviation trending in the direction of safety that it has. And those are jet engines and other technologies, air traffic control. It's never been safer to fly in the skies, and study of human factors. And that involves the psychology of flying airplanes and airline operations. And we're just going to highlight those briefly here tonight. One of the biggest factors to influence safety, as I mentioned, has been jet engines. The ones that are in service today are super safe, right, Eric? They're like the Energizer Bunny. They keep going and going and going. Okay.
That's right. The more they run, the more they run.
Yeah. But oh, Captain Ron, what about the one about 2 weeks ago that quit running? Well, yeah, that happens too, but not nearly so often as you'll remember up here, because it leaves a mark on your brain up there, and you have something called confirmation bias. So if you run around thinking, well, flying isn't safe, and then you see an article in the paper like the United airplane that had the engine failure, then that little part of you up there says, "See, I told you." But that's not fair because it is a rare occurrence there.
And every engine deserves a day off after 25 or 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why there's 2 engines. That's why there's 2.
Exactly. Good point, Diane. And probably the 2 biggest things about jet engines are the fact that they're highly efficient and they're built out of new high-tech materials. So that they got bigger with more thrust and the weight has gone down. I don't know what I'm just guessing here, Eric. I'm thinking like a 777 engine probably is a third less or half less in weight than what it would have been if they could have even built that thing 50 years ago. You think?
Sure, and what we talk about with landing limits and takeoff limits and all this other stuff, the tremendous increase in power has also increased the safety margins because excess performance available on an engine. That's made a big difference in performance calculations.
Yeah. Moving on there are other technologies. Like I said, engines are not the only place where we've improved safety. And this is symbolic. We put winglets out there because we get a lot of, just recently, we got a question on winglets. What's a winglet? It's a little bitty kind of looks like somebody bent the end of the wing up there, and it has to do with performance and laminar flow. And it keeps something called tip stall down. And if you want to know more about that, you got to come back. So, because we're not going to go into the detail on that tonight. But anyway, it helps the performance of the airplane. It adds up to 15% greater fuel economy. So we can go faster and get better fuel economy with that. Other things that we talk about, TCAS. Talk about TCAS, Eric.
Well, we have traffic advisories issued by air traffic controllers, but people always say, how do you know where the other airplanes are? Now the other airplanes generally are equipped with onboard equipment, traffic collision avoidance system that really is like a fish finder on a boat. If you live in East Overshoe, Wisconsin, and you see other airplanes around you, their height above you, below you, whether they're closing on you, and they're color coded to make it simple for the pilot, so they don't have to think as to whether they're proximate traffic or they're white, or they're white is just a non-threatening target. Proximate traffic would be yellow, and then if they become an issue, they start to flash red, and the airplane starts to give you directions to avoid that other airplane. That's been a tremendous asset in dense airspace environments to help avoid mid-airs.
So it resolves it, and we don't just have to look at and interpret it. It actually has an oral alert and a warning. It says, climb faster. It tells us what to do in that.
And not only does it tell us, it tells the other airplane to go the other way.
Right.
It tells you to go up and him to go down, or vice versa.
Right. Great tool, and been around for quite a while now. Metallurgy, the metals and the technologies have just gotten better and better and better. Wind shear alert, that's another one that I think would be importance to or interest to many of you out there. When we're flying around or in areas of where we have weather and stuff, we have similar technologies to what Eric just talked about, where it tells us about performance of the airplane, and it actually changes the display of our flight instruments up there to help us better perform and get out of there. Not only do we have that in real time on the airplane, but we have to practice it in the simulator to develop proficiency in that. And then probably some of the bigger changes are the navigation displays in the cockpit. And we're going to touch on one of those when we talk about air traffic control. But we have just tremendous assistance now with our horizontal display indicator, where we can actually see a horizontal depiction of our map in front of us, of a little symbol for what our airplane is. We can put up other things on that map, like alternate airports. What other things? I guess we can get some certainly radar. We can put the radar up there and look at things like that. Anything to add on that, Eric? About the
we can overlay weather, overlay traffic, overlay routes or alternate routes, and overlay navigation aids, and all that kind of stuff can be pulled onto or put off of one screen, so that we don't have to hunt around to find it. That's right.
Yeah. And the next slide there on air traffic control, never been safer to fly in the airspace than it is right now. And this is a depiction talking about a new system. Well, not new anymore, but finally is about. You did not have that on the 757, did you, Eric? Because you had an older.
What's that? ADSB?
The ADSB.
They were just. It's a federal requirement to install it, and they were just installing it when I left.
Okay. Yeah. And we had our good friend Nat Fuqua on a couple of weeks ago, who's a 777 pilot, and one of the things he talked about was the absolute phenomenal assistance that this thing called ADSB provides. What it means is, before that time, if you're flying over long expanses of water or unpopulated areas where there were no radar station sites down there, you were not visible on any radar screen. And that's one of the dilemmas with the airliner that went down out of Indonesia several years ago and caused great consternation in 2014. But now we have ADSB, and what that does, it's a satellite-based system, and through a relay of satellites and ground stations, now people can, the controllers, not only can they see you like they could in the radar days, but I think the resolution is down within 5 or 10 feet or something like that. So it adds not only safety, making sure that we know where everybody's at over large areas where prior to that time you would only have airborne radar, which is very limited, and we can send more airplanes in a tighter amount of space, and that's particularly important when it comes to the North Atlantic tracks, where we have over 1,000 airplanes a day going in both directions between the North American and European continent over there. So you can see this is a symbolic of the pieces in the system here, with the satellites and then the ground stations all coordinated there. So those are the main reasons why airplanes are safer today than they've ever been before. And one of the things we had here we had a slide here. If you look at this link here, I believe you can go over there, and it has a 2-minute visualization of all the radar traffic, showing how it's accelerated, shows you how the traffic migrates over the day, as in the daylight hours, and just how busy the airspace is around the globe anymore.
Ron, I do have that video.
Oh, cool. Yeah, put it up there. It's just kind of fun to watch. So
and you can
better than listen to me. So
that is really cool.
So maybe you wanna
Very cool.
What people are seeing. What are we watching?
Yeah, those are tracks of airplanes in real time, and it shows this is coming. I think it's coming from the European continent going back over to North America.
Mm-hmm.
And it just shows you it's kind of cool, gadgety, but kind of cool.
Well, what's really cool is that the streams are going one way predominantly, and then they switch and it goes the other way, right? So you always take off in the evening from the East Coast.
Right.
You
Right.
arrive in the
And
morning.
arrive to it,
in
yeah, in the
Europe,
morning in North.
Yeah,
in-
it has a
and it's the other way around from Europe. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and the North Atlantic is a special area for navigation around the world because there is so much traffic that you really do need like freeways in there. And that's not Disneyland; those aren't roller coasters; those are actually people flying those tracks. So you can see they stay on course, which is essential, and we're counting on everybody to do that. So air traffic control is the second leg of the stool as to why flying is so safe. And the last one is something we call human factors. And we could talk about that. This first slide here is human factors. You can see this is a early weight and balance problem for a burro driver. If I don't know if I don't think it's on the screen yet.
I am sharing it, so it
Oh,
might
yeah,
just take a
okay.
little while to get
Yeah, yeah, just a minute. Okay. There you go. So I like to say this is decision making then. And the next slide is decision making now. So we always, as long as there are human beings, there are going to be mistakes. And this, I imagine this was either a problem where they were either loading the airplane, the ground crew was, and somebody forgot to put a little tail prop underneath that, or they were unloading it and unloaded the front of it before the other one. But anyway, it is about decision making. It's about the psychology of working with other human beings and getting the best. We've all heard about synergy, how the sum of the individual parts is greater than any one individual part, and that's our goal in the airline industry. And human factors has done that. Human factors is really about how to work with other people and be more self-aware as a team of what's going on at any given moment in there. And I've mentioned before the healthcare industry. Years ago, back in the late 80s, when we were just cranking up our programs in aviation, they came and sat in, and a lot of hospitals have adapted some of the strategies and techniques that we have used in order to improve operating room safety and in general patient safety. Because it's reported that there are as many as 400,000 passengers, as much as 400,000 patients that die every year due to medical mistakes, and that's not good if you go in the hospital. So it's changed the industry, and it's changed other industries around that. So the takeaways from chapter 7, we're talking about why aviation is so safe, is a discussion about ongoing technology improvements, air traffic control, and the study of human factors. And the next time that you're scared to death in your boots and at 40,000 feet worrying about what's going to happen if it's safe up there, know that these things are going on. There's a lot more people than you could ever imagine that have been involved in the role of making that flight safe for you that day. Okay.
Ron, when you talk about human factors and particularly teamwork as far in the aircraft, one thing we always do that I know you did and Eric did is at the beginning of every flight, every trip, every leg is we have a briefing, and it's both the pilots and for us, there's 2 flight attendants, and the 4 of us get together, and the captain tells us what the flight's going to be like, how long it's going to be, what the altitude, whether or not we're going to have bumps. He or she gives us the normal rundown on emergency procedures. The 2 flight attendants, we ask whatever questions we need to. We're going to have to sit down. The 2 flight attendants talk between the 2 of us of how we're going to run the cabin for that trip. So before we ever leave the ground, before you all as passengers get on the plane, the 4 of us have talked to each other about what's going to happen. And so nothing is a surprise. Nothing is a surprise for us.
And that's in addition to when the flight attendants meet in their ready room before they even meet the crew, the rest of the crew, the pilots out there at the airplane. They have a discussion about things that are current in their part of the operation. We as pilots do the same thing. We have a discussion with a person called the dispatcher, and then we have various phases of the flight for which we go through a very detailed briefing, as you can imagine, before the departure. So when we're at the gate, we're talking about what it's going to be like on takeoff, even though we've done it hundreds of, if not thousands of times. And we're talking about things like current threats that we might have, like weather off the end of the runway, or traffic, or delays at the airport, things like that. So it's a well thought out process. And if you did that, imagine if you sat down with whoever's going to go to the grocery store with you, and you talked about just exactly what you were going to see along the way, then you would know, among other things, if the person who's driving the vehicle did something off of the plan, you'd know that would be a good time to do an intervention. That's why we do briefings, so that other people can be involved with what's going on there.
Yeah.
The most important backup system that we have are the other crew members. And
Remember, Ron, we never did that when we started, did we? I mean,
no.
Hi, how are you?
No.
And they give us a one finger salute, and we go in there and shut the door and end of it.
Well, we do. Even simple. It sounds simple, but it's really important for us. If the captain says we're going to have a really quick taxi, that means a lot to us back in the back. A really quick taxi means we don't have a whole lot of time to get everything done, safety briefings that we have to do. So what may seem like a real simple thing is a very meaningful thing for safety.
Right. Dieter, were you able to make contact with Tiffany?
I sent her the link to the email that you forwarded. I have not really received anything.
Okay, so we'll forego that, and we will get her back on.
However, I do have a question from Susan, and there's a couple other questions I know, so we can just seamlessly move into the next segment.
Yeah, I have an idea too. Tiffany, if you can hear us, if you want, just call me on my cell phone, and we'll just patch you in that way. And I will let me put that in real quick. I'll put it in my messenger.
We also have a question from Tracy as well.
Okay, cool. And Susan had a question. Let's maybe
We've
just
got her question coming up from last week.
Eric, Susan wants to know, is there a way to find out in advance how long a plane will be on the tarmac, basically, before you take off? So is there a website that you could just pull up and say, I'm gonna be waiting on the taxiway for 35 minutes?
Are you ready? Because here comes my most verbose answer to date. No.
No.
Oh.
I was going to say the same thing.
I've not fully explored flight radar. Chris last week, our guest last week, he used it. You could put your flight in here and it'll track, all your flights and things like that. I would not be surprised if you can get some kind of delay trend or something like that.
I will tell you that.
But not the kind that you want, Susan, when you leave the gate and they stop and they don't move. Okay. But that, again, the responsibility falls on the crew, particularly the pilots. If it's going to be an extended delay, you can kind of get an idea. If you look out in one direction, the departure end of the runway there, if you look off in the distance, it's all dark with rain clouds and things like that. You might imagine that they have to slow down the number of departures because they have to allow more airplanes to land and things like that. But like Eric said, the simple answer is no. There's nothing that is that timely. Nor, and just think about it. You might ask the flight attendant and get her attention, say, hey, what's going on? And she might prompt the crew if you're just sitting there. But usually what happens is it's just a little bit of a slowdown in the system. And as the airlines, you'd think, the way we decide what time we're going to depart is we try to survey you and see what time you want to get on the airplane in Phoenix and go to Boston. Okay. And then before COVID-19, we might try to pick 5 or 6 times a day that we would go to Boston out of Phoenix. And then with COVID-19, now that there are fewer nonstops to Boston and more direct but not nonstop flights that go through Dallas or Chicago or something like that. So what that means is now there are fewer choices out there, and so they're spread out more over the day, and you can get involved in delays at any point in time. So delays are what they are, and the best thing we can do as pilots and flight attendants is pass on the information to you. And remember, just because there's a delay, it does not mean that something's wrong. That's the negative bias that you have going on in your brain. Your elephant elephant brain is saying that can't be good, and it has no basis in facts until you hear.
Most of the time,
Who asked? Oh, sorry, Dan, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna say, most of the time in my only 2 years of flying, most of the time there's a delay. It's an ATC delay.
Yeah.
And the thing that a lot of passengers don't understand, if you're at a location and you're flying and there's nobody there, you're the only plane that's leaving, it just doesn't matter whether or not you can leave. It matters whether you can land. And so if you're leaving from East Overshoe and you are the only person, the only plane that's leaving, but you're going to Phoenix and there's 9 million planes landing all at the same time, that's the driving factor of whether or not you can take off. They won't let you take off unless they know you can land.
And the good news from the pilot's point of view is in the old days, we used to take those delays in the air. We would just launch and not worry about it. Now we have the National Air Route Traffic Control Center in Washington, D.C. that coordinates in the domestic U.S. It coordinates all of the air traffic. So as Diane said, I might be taking off out of Phoenix headed for Boston, but there's a holdup for airplanes that are going into Chicago, which is causing them to back up in the airspace overhead. And so that may affect us and they may hold us on the ground. So
Brian, give me 10 more seconds. I was just going to say you can improve your odds. Other than my smart mouth answer, you can improve your odds by flying on a Saturday, by choosing a red eye, or by choosing a takeoff at 5:30 or 6 a.m. at a horrible hour to get up. And a lot of people oversleep before the system gets saturated, or when it's not saturated. You'll improve your odds greatly of getting out to the runway and get going.
Right.
Yeah. Crank up the volume on your Fearless Flight harmonizer when you're sitting there delayed
That's
on
what
the
Michelle is
It's a
doing.
little bit of a delay in the morning. By the afternoon, it becomes a huge delay.
Yeah.
It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, so that by the time I'm flying, I've got a plane that's going out at 8 or 8:30. It might be 10. But as Eric said, if you're leaving at 5:30, that airplane's been there all night. And that sucker is going to go out at 5:30 in the morning. No questions asked.
Yeah. Okay. We had a question from Susan Michelaccio last week on Facebook in the group there, which another advertisement for the group. If you got questions that come up after this, please post them in there and we'll do that. This was a big enough one, I think, important to everybody. She says, does the plane have a weight capacity? Yes, it does. And sometimes it can't take off at more than there's a limiting weight for the whole airplane. On those little wheels that stick down there, you can only put so much on there because that's and so much fuel on there. And then there's other weights in there. It's a total weight because of structural limits. There's another weight limit for takeoff that varies a little bit. Never can be more than the maximum weight for the airplane, but it varies according to how warm it is out and how high altitude the airport is, because the thrust goes down, the warmer it gets and the higher the ambient temperature it is. And structural limits, we talked about that. And what else, sir? You remember?
Tracy has a question as well. She would like to know if Southwest aircraft are equipped with the ADSB that we were talking about earlier.
Don't know for sure, but I imagine they will be because that's
Eric is shaking his head.
Eric is nodding his head. Yes.
It was all federally required by last February.
Okay.
They
Cool.
got
Yeah. And yeah. What can we say?
Also, I want to just add to the whole ATC. Jim had a great, and he's mentioned that actually on the show before. Jim said that you can tune into the ATC radio and they have an app. And so you could do that.
Yeah.
And I will say for Flight Radar, I know for a fact that they crowdsource information as well. So if you are a Flight Radar 24 app user, you can literally use the app and punch in your flight and your information and it gets updated as well. I think they do fact check.
Yeah, they do.
But it does. But I have sat there in different airports and gotten the update on the Flight Radar before the announcement in the boarding area is being made. So they either plug in directly or get it crowdsourced from people on the
And
ground.
and what Dieter mentioned there, that would be an advantage when you're sitting in the boarding area because you may hear delays developing. United Airlines, as far back as I can remember, first time I ever rode them, it was in the 60s, and they had a channel on their entertainment system dedicated to air traffic control for their airplane and the frequency. And I believe they still do that. And it's controversial, but it's interesting to listen to. Even for me, I find it fascinating.
You know, and sometimes the passengers know about stuff before we do, the flight attendants. And the reason for that is they're on their phones and we're not allowed to be on our phones. You know, we're busy doing safety checks and pre-flight checks on the aircraft, or doing wherever we're doing. And the passenger, all he or she has to do is look at her phone for stuff. And they're saying, did you hear that? And we're going, no, I'm sorry. We don't want to sound like we're stupid, but we're busy doing something else, you know, and while the passenger can concentrate on updating whatever, the way we look at it is we get there when we get there. I mean, that's
JetBlue was famous for putting cameras on their airplanes and allowing the passengers to see certain things, or well, no, they had TV coverage there, and then they had a malfunction about 20 years ago or now, where they landed in Long Beach with a landing gear cocked, and they debated whether or not they were going to allow the passengers on board to watch live coverage of them landing, because they flew around for a while and burned down fuel. So you know, be careful what you pray for, I think is the term for this. So anyway, all right. So wait. So yeah, we can only taxi with so much in total on the airplane. We can only taxi, that has to be reduced sometimes because of weather. And Diane reminded me of the thing that the center of gravity. So on the airplane. So sometimes you may, in rare occasions, and more during COVID because there are fewer airplanes, when you're not full, we tend to have to keep more people up towards the front of the airplane. And so the more people, if we get too many people in the back, they have to move it up. And you might say, oh my God, are you kidding me? We had to move people around. Yeah, you do. We didn't worry about that in the old days. And the airplane, frankly, you know, has got enough oomph to usually not even have to worry about that. But as technology has improved, as our ability to know exactly who's on the airplane, exactly how much everybody weighs and the cargo and all that, we've improved that. So weight and balance has become much more finely tuned. And sometimes we have to move that around. The last thing in the category of aviation news update was a story that just came out today or the last couple of days. The FAA has been has said that it's going to extend its stricter enforcement against unruly passengers. They're really clamping down on people refusing to wear masks. So if you're tempted and you can't forego the temptation, don't fly. Because you can get in a lot of trouble. The airlines themselves are keeping the list, as Diane's pointed out in weeks past, and you might not get to fly down the road when you expect that. And it would be a really, really rude awakening and surprise someday.
The announcements we have to give now have been added to. And just what you said, Ron, is that part of the announcements that we make with regard to masking is a specific announcement that says you can incur criminal and civil penalties, and then on from that. So it's so clear. It is very clear.
And this article, they've even traced some of the connections to the insurrection on January 6th there. So it's just, you know, be nice to each other. It's just the way to be. So anyway, all right. You look like you're about to have one last comment, Eric.
Yeah.
No, I'm just propping myself up. It's all very exciting.
All right.
He's just stretching.
All right. Well, we want to thank all of you again for coming back yet another week. And we promise we'll keep coming back next episode, next week, a week from tonight. And we will try to get our guest back on here because she's got a great story. And I want her to have an opportunity to share it. Because as I say to our guest, it means a lot more coming from you all than it does from any of us. And so we will be back next week. Myself, Eric, Dieter, Diane, and Elaine. So thanks again for watching us on Fearless Flight Live. We will see you next week. Bye-bye. Have a great week.
See you next
Bye,
week.
everybody.